An unlikely encounter. The soft chime of the shop's bell rang through the air as I stood behind the counter, carefully tying a satin ribbon around a bouquet of white lilies. The scent of fresh roses and lavender lingered, wrapping around me like a familiar embrace. It was just another ordinary afternoon at Bloom and Grace, my little flower shop, a peaceful escape from the rush of the outside world. I glanced up from my work expecting to see one of my usual customers. Instead, a man I had never seen before stepped inside. He didn't look like the typical type to frequent a humble florist like mine. Tall and poised, he carried himself with an air of quiet authority. His navy blue suit was perfectly tailored, not a single wrinkle in sight. His dark hair, neatly styled, only added to his sharp features, defined cheekbones, a strong jaw, and piercing blue eyes that scanned the shop with a calm intensity. He wasn't just handsome, he was the kind of person who seemed to belong to another world entirely. I quickly straightened, brushing invisible dust from my apron. "Welcome to Bloom and Grace. How can I help you?" His gaze shifted to me, and for a moment I felt caught in those deep blue eyes. Then his lips parted slightly. "Do you have violets?" His voice was smooth, rich with a tone that carried effortless confidence. I nodded, motioning toward a display near the window. "We do, right over there. They're fresh from this morning." He took slow, measured steps toward the flowers, his fingers grazing the delicate petals as if considering something beyond their beauty. I hesitated before stepping closer, curiosity getting the best of me. "Are you looking for a specific arrangement?" He tilted his head slightly as if the question had caught him off guard. "Not exactly. He paused, thoughtful. "Violets used to be my mother's favorite." I softened. "That's a lovely memory to hold on to. Flowers have a way of carrying emotions, don't they?" His expression flickered for a moment as if he was debating whether to respond. Then a ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. "Yes, they do." I reached for one of the violet arrangements, adjusting a stray leaf. "Would you like me to wrap them for you?" He exhaled lightly as if shaking off a thought. "No, I'll take them as they are." I nodded and rang up the purchase, my fingers moving quickly over the register. As I handed him the violets, his fingertips briefly brushed mine, just a fleeting touch but enough to send an odd warmth through me. "I don't think I caught your name," I found myself saying. He hesitated, then met my gaze directly. "Damien." Something about the way he said it made me feel like there was more to that name than he was letting on. "Well, Damien, I hope she would have loved these." His lips quirked slightly at the corners, though his eyes remained unreadable. "Thank you, Miss Amelia." "Amelia," he repeated as if testing how it felt on his tongue. Then with a small nod he turned and walked out, the door chime echoing in his wake. I stood there for a moment, watching as he disappeared down the street. There was something about him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I had no idea then that this fleeting encounter was only the beginning. The memory of Damien lingered longer than I expected. There was something about him, his quiet intensity, the way he had spoken with a certain weight behind his words. People came and went from my shop every day, but he was different. I found myself wondering if I would ever see him again. Days passed, then a week. Just when I had convinced myself that he had been nothing more than a passing customer, the bell above my door chimed again. I looked up and there he was. Damien stood in the doorway, his presence just as striking as before. This time he wasn't in a formal suit but a well-fitted black coat, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. His sharp blue eyes scanned the shop before they landed on me. For a brief second I forgot to speak. "You're back," I finally managed, setting down a pair of pruning shears. A hint of amusement flickered across his face. "I am." I stepped out from behind the counter. "More violets?" "No," he glanced at a row of pale pink roses before turning back to me. "I thought I'd see what else this place had to offer." I folded my arms, tilting my head slightly. "You don't strike me as someone who randomly browses flower shops." A smirk ghosted his lips. "You're right. But let's just say, I found this place interesting." I arched a brow. "The flowers or the shopkeeper?" His silence stretched for a beat too long. My heart did something strange in my chest, but I quickly brushed it aside, forcing a chuckle. "Well, if you need recommendations I can help." "What's the occasion?" Damien hesitated before answering. "A formal event." I nodded, leading him toward an arrangement of deep red and ivory roses. Classic choice for something elegant. Roses are timeless. His fingers brushed lightly over the petals, his gaze thoughtful. You know a lot about flowers. I smiled. I should hope so. I practically grew up in this shop. His expression shifted, just slightly, as if that detail intrigued him. It's rare to see someone so dedicated to what they do. I shrugged. It's not about dedication. It's just home. For a moment, neither of us spoke. There was something comfortable yet oddly charged about the silence between us. I had no idea who Damien really was, but there was an unmistakable presence about him, like he carried something far heavier than just a bouquet of flowers. Finally, he exhaled lightly. I'll take these. I nodded, wrapping the roses carefully. As I handed them over, I felt it again, that fleeting touch of his fingers against mine. Enjoy the event, I said, watching him closely. His lips curved slightly, but his eyes held something unreadable. I'm sure it will be interesting. And just like before, he turned and walked out. I had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time I saw him. What I didn't know was how much that second encounter would change my life. A few more days passed before I saw Damien again. By now, I had stopped questioning why his visits left me with a lingering curiosity. There was something about him. Something that felt unfinished, as if every encounter was just the beginning of a story yet to unfold. When the shop bell chimed late one evening, I already knew who it was before I even turned around. Damien stood in the doorway, dressed impeccably as always, though tonight there was something different about him. His expression was guarded, his usual cool confidence tempered by something heavier. I wiped my hands on my apron and gave him a small smile. Back again? You must really love flowers. A ghost of a smirk touched his lips. Not particularly. I arched a brow. Then why do you keep coming here? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, his gaze steady on mine. Because I need your help, Amelia. Something about the way he said my name sent a strange flutter through my chest. I swallowed, crossing my arms. With what? He hesitated, as if weighing his words. I need you to pretend to be my fiancée. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? His expression remained unreadable, but there was a quiet urgency beneath his composed exterior. It's complicated, but I don't have much time. My family, they expect me to enter an arranged marriage. I frowned. And you don't want to? His jaw tightened slightly. No. I studied him carefully, trying to understand why he would ask me of all people. So, let me get this straight. You want me, a florist you barely know, to pretend to be engaged to you, so you can avoid an arranged marriage. He nodded. Yes. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. That's insane. Perhaps, he admitted, his voice calm. But it's also necessary. I should have said no. I should have walked away from whatever tangled mess he was offering me. But something about the way he looked at me, like he was silently daring me to refuse, made me pause. Why me? I asked, my voice softer now. Damien's gaze flickered with something unreadable. Because you're the only person I trust to do this without expecting anything in return. That caught me off guard. Trust? We barely knew each other. And yet, standing there in my little flower shop, staring into the eyes of a man who clearly carried secrets I didn't understand, I realized something. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to know more about him, about the life he was trying to escape. And maybe, just maybe, some part of me wanted to be a part of it. Taking a deep breath, I met his gaze and nodded. All right, Damien, I said. I'll be your fiancé. The days following my agreement to Damien's proposal felt like a strange blur. We spent hours discussing the details of the engagement, crafting a story that would pass as real. To the outside world, it would appear as though we were a couple, one brought together by love, not circumstance. In reality, it was a carefully constructed facade. I found myself practicing what to say when we were in public, adjusting my posture and learning how to play the part of a fiancé. But no matter how many times we rehearsed, there was always something about Damien that didn't quite add up. There were moments, fleeting but powerful, when I would catch him looking at me, not with affection, but with an unreadable expression that hinted at something deeper, something hidden. One evening we were sitting in the small cafe near my shop, discussing the upcoming gala where we would make our engagement public. I had begun to feel more comfortable in the role, But still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Damien was keeping something from me. You don't have to do this, I said softly, breaking the silence. You could just tell your family the truth. You don't have to marry someone you don't want to. Damien looked at me, his jaw tightening as he leaned back in his chair. It's not that simple, Amelia. The consequences for refusing an arranged marriage are more than you realize. I studied him for a long moment, watching his eyes shift away. It was like there was an invisible wall between us that he refused to let me cross. What kind of consequences? I pressed, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. For a split second I saw something in his eyes. A flash of pain, something raw and vulnerable that I rarely saw in him. Things I can't explain to you, he said, his voice quiet. Not yet. I leaned forward, sensing the tension in his words. Why not? Damien, you can trust me. His eyes hardened, and for the first time I saw a flicker of fear. It's not about trust, Amelia. It's about keeping you safe. I frowned. Safe from what? He looked at me long and hard, the weight of his gaze heavy. Finally he sighed, and for a moment I thought he was going to tell me everything. Instead he stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm sorry, he said, his voice strained. I can't talk about this now. I just need you to trust me. I watched him leave, the empty chair across from me suddenly feeling like a chasm. I didn't know what it was that Damien was hiding, but I was certain now. There was something far darker behind his proposal, something he was desperate to protect me from. Over the next few days I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. The more I replayed his words in my head, the more I realized that his secret ran deeper than I could have imagined. And the more I found myself wishing he would finally open up to me, trusting me with whatever burden he carried. It was only a matter of time before I would find out. And when I did, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The evening of the gala arrived sooner than I expected, and with it, a wave of anxiety that I couldn't quite shake. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the delicate lace of the dress I had chosen. It was elegant yet simple, nothing too extravagant but enough to make a statement. My fingers trembled as I smoothed down the fabric, wondering if I was truly ready to play the part of Damien's fiancée in front of an entire room full of strangers. I had barely caught a glimpse of Damien in the hours leading up to the event. He had been distant, lost in his own thoughts, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something colder, harder. It only deepened my growing concern. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that whatever secret he was carrying was about to break free. The knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find Damien standing in the doorway, his face partially obscured by the shadows. He wore a tuxedo, the sharp lines of the black fabric contrasting with the soft light in the room. For a moment I simply stared at him, taken aback by how handsome he looked. But there was something different in his eyes, a depth of sorrow that I had never seen before. Are you ready? He asked, his voice steady, though there was an undercurrent of tension in his tone. I nodded, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. I think so. He stepped into the room, and for the first time, I noticed the way his posture was more rigid than usual. There was something weighing on him, something that was impossible to ignore. He reached out to help adjust the strap of my dress, his fingers brushing against my skin. The simple contact sent a wave of warmth through me, but it also made the air between us feel charged. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Damien exhaled deeply, his eyes dropping to the floor. Amelia, there's something I need to tell you before we go. My heart skipped a beat. The calmness in his voice didn't match the fear that now swirled in my stomach. What is it? He hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. When he finally met my gaze, I saw something that shook me to the core. Regret. I didn't tell you the whole truth when I asked you to pretend to be my fiancé, he began, his voice soft but filled with weight. The truth is, my family isn't just pressuring me to marry. They're forcing me into it. And if I don't comply, he trailed off, his expression hardening. The consequences won't just affect me. They'll affect you too. I took a step back, my mind racing. What do you mean? What are they going to do? Damien's jaw clenched as he fought to keep his emotions in check. My family has connections. Dangerous ones. If I refuse to marry the woman they've chosen for me, there are things they can do, things I don't want you to be involved in. My mind struggled to process his words. But why didn't you tell me this before? Why put me in the middle of it? Because I couldn't bear the thought of you being dragged into this nightmare, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I thought I could find a way to get out of it on my own, but now it's too late. I don't know how to protect you from what's coming. The weight of his confession hit me like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened and I felt the world around me blur. Damien, I don't understand. What are we supposed to do? He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch mine, his grip surprisingly gentle. We have no choice but to play along. We'll act like we're in love, like we're a real couple. If I can make it through this, if I can survive the pressure from my family, maybe I'll have a chance to break free. But until then, we can't let anyone suspect the truth. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. This was no longer just a simple arrangement. This was a life I hadn't signed up for, a life that was far darker than I had ever imagined. Yet looking into Damien's eyes that were filled with desperation and pain, I knew there was no turning back now. Are you sure? I asked quietly, my voice trembling. He nodded, his expression unwavering. I'm sure. As we left for the gala that evening, I knew that I was stepping into a world I didn't fully understand. But with Damien at my side, I also knew I had no choice but to play the part of his fiancée. The truth was out now, and whatever secret he had been hiding, I was about to face it head-on. And somehow, I knew this was just the beginning of something far bigger than either of us could have ever anticipated. The gala went on as planned, but the evening felt strangely empty. I moved through the crowd, playing my role as Damien's fiancée, smiling and exchanging polite words with people I didn't know. But all the while I couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in my stomach. Damien was quieter than usual, his gaze frequently scanning the room as though he was searching for something, or someone. It wasn't until later that night, after the event had concluded, that I finally understood why. I had just stepped out of the ballroom into the cool evening air when I felt a sudden, sharp tug on my arm. Before I could react, a hand clamped over my mouth and I was pulled backward into the shadows. My heart raced in my chest as panic surged. I struggled, but the grip was too strong, too overwhelming. Amelia, stay quiet, a voice whispered in my ear. It wasn't Damien's voice. I fought harder, twisting in the stranger's grasp. But the more I struggled, the tighter their grip became. The panic clawed at my throat. What was happening? Why was I being dragged away? Suddenly, I heard a familiar voice shout my name. Amelia. It was Damien. His voice was filled with both relief and anger, but I couldn't see him yet. The man holding me pulled me into an alleyway, and I realized just how isolated I was from the rest of the guests. My mind raced, but before I could think, the sound of footsteps approaching echoed through the alley. Then, in a blur, Damien appeared, moving faster than I could process. His eyes were wide with alarm, but there was something more. Something darker. Let her go. Damien's voice rang out, filled with authority and a cold fury I had never heard before. The man holding me smirked, stepping back but not releasing his grip. She's coming with us, whether you like it or not. Damien's expression hardened. His eyes glowed with a fierce intensity one hadn't seen before. Without warning, he lunged forward, his movements swift and precise. The man holding me barely had time to react before Damien's fist collided with his jaw. The force of the punch sent the man sprawling to the ground. He groaned in pain, struggling to regain his footing, but Damien was already on him. In seconds, he had the man pinned to the ground, his hands gripping the stranger's collar with enough force to choke him. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? Damien growled, his voice low and menacing. The man, gasping for air, stared up at him with wide eyes. Why, you don't scare me. Damien leaned closer, his lips curling into a dangerous smile. No? Then maybe you'll be more cooperative when you realize the mistake you've made. He glanced back at me, his gaze softening just for a moment before turning back to the man. Let her go now, or I will make sure you regret this. The man hesitated, clearly weighing his options. But after a long, tense silence, he finally let out a defeated sigh. Fine. You win, Prince. Damien released the man with a final shove, watching him stagger away into the darkness. Once the threat was gone, he turned to me, his eyes filled with concern. Are you all right? I nodded, trembling from the shock of the encounter. I think so. Damien stepped closer, his presence somehow both comforting and intense.
We're two hearts in the dark, chasing whispers through the night. Secrets buried in the stars, hidden in the pale moonlight. Every glance feels like a spark, every word just out of reach. We're dancing close but standing still, on the edge of love's mystique.